make a counter. So I'll call it Memcache counter. And I'll copy the app YAML. I'm just overwriting the same app over and over again. And then, let's use a different, this one. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of admin here. We're just going to have slash. So we create our context, we get the current user, which we'll need in a second. Don't need this stuff. And we do memcache.increment. Let me add it so I can get the. So it takes the context, it takes a key, so we'll call this global. It takes a delta, which is how much you want to increment it by. It takes an initial value. I think I'm missing something. Okay, I'm not missing anything. And what it returns is the new value. So we'll call this global count. And possible error, we're just going to ignore the error. And so we'll just print that to the response. Okay. And then we want a user count. So we'll say user count. Same thing. And what we change is the key. So we'll say u.email plus say dot count. But otherwise the same. And so we can print that too. So let's just say global user. Sir. Global 1, user 1, this keeps, incremented a whole bunch. And that's because it's looking for the favicon. So good trick if you're using the regular router here, do add this to your code. You can say http.notfound. And it resurrect and return. And basically, if the path wasn't slash, so it was any other path, we'll just say 404, and that'll fix that counting problem. Maybe, yeah. So now it's by 1. How do we test to make sure this, this is counting? I see the same number because I'm using the same count. You can make an incognito window. So this is like without a session at all. So the issue here is that the user is blank, and that's because this doesn't require a login. So now it'll redirect me to ask for my login. So let's call this test 2. Okay. So see the global count went up, the per user started at 1, and so now that user count is different from the other one. Okay. Because they're 2 separate users, and they'll have different keys. So there is this handy feature, I think it's 8,000. So this is like the admin window, and you can sort of get data about what's happening behind the scenes. And so we can have this Memcache viewer, and it says that there's 3 items in there. I don't think you can display it in here, but you can, if you have the key from here. We know the key was global, so let's see what that gives me. 36. So you can use this to debug, to see what's in there. And the other was, so we test add example.com.counter, which is kind of a weird key. That's 28, and then test 2 is like a smaller number, 6. So we're using the email as part of the key. So that's handy if you want to debug, you can just go look in there. And there's other things you can look into too. So that's pretty much it. I mean, pretty straightforward way to implement a counter. Pretty easy. Any questions about that? So we can redeploy and see it live. Live on the real site here, which was this. Yeah, sometimes it takes a bit. So testing this guy is a little trickier because in order to test it, you have to have a real Google account. So that can be a little cumbersome. So maybe just get a friend to look at it. There we go. But I feel pretty good that it'll. Oh, did you do it? Yeah. So mine was 6, but the global was 11 because some other people visited. So yeah, so we can use Memcache for that. Like I said, we can also use it for caching. Just keep in mind that this is sort of all of your instances, all of the processes running. It's global. When I redeploy, it doesn't erase it. It's all sitting there. The data is volatile, which means it can go away at any time. But in general, it's pretty sticky. It'll stay a while. But yeah, it survives a reboot and stuff of this process. So yeah, it's handy for that kind of stuff. And we can sort of, so how do we use it for sessions? So I'll show you that. So we saw how to use Memcache and how to use it for counter. Let's use it for a session, because I described that. So I create a new Memcache session, like I do the copy the YAML again. And then copy this guy. So the idea here is that what we want to do is get an ID, and so we'll generate an ID and then store data in Memcache associated with that ID, and so we can pull it out with a cookie. So remember, we can generate an ID with the UUID, and then so the first thing we need to do is get the cookie. Right, so I say rec.cookie session ID. Let's just get all this plumbing working first. So I'm going to go to this folder, session. Oh, I printed it in the terminal, which is confusing. Let me change that. There, now to print to the page. No. So we have to create a new one. This is where we create our ID, so I'll take that guy. And now we should have a cookie. Cool. It's changing every time because I forgot to set the cookie. So we set the cookie, I think it's res rec cookie, something like that. Or maybe it's just, yeah, res cookie. Whoops. Now it's sticky. So this number is going to stick around with the session because I put it in the cookie. And then we can use that as the key in Memcache, okay? And so the idea is that I go to the, I get this context, and I can use it as part of the key. So I can say memcache dot get ctx, and the key is the ID, so that's cookie.value. Okay, and that's going to give me an item and possibly an error. So let's print out that. So it's not in Memcache yet, right? And so I'm just going to do that and say create a new item. I forgot what the name of the field was. Key value. The key is going to be the session ID, so that's cookie.value, and the value we'll get back to in a second. So let's get rid of the error. And this should be bytes. Okay. So now I should be seeing over here. These are 3 question marks, that's what that is. And so the idea here is that I want to store data associated with the session. So what would I use to do that? What's a good way to store arbitrary data? In a map. So I might say of string to say string, okay? And I might say that email is someone's email, right? So I might say test@example.com. And this is the data I want to associate with the session. So I create a map. Yeah, I'm not using it yet. And the idea is that how do I get the map into here? Because this takes a slice of bytes, and this is not a slice of bytes. So how do I convert this into a slice of bytes?
JSON string file.
JSON, exactly. So you have 2 options. You can use what's called GOB, G-O-B, and that's an internal binary format for encoding in Go. But I would just use JSON, because that's easier to debug. And so we just say Marshall, remember that? .Marshall. You hand it the thing you want to marshal, it gives you bytes. And so we can just use that here. So let's try that. That's not that interesting. Let me see it. String. There we go. So that's what I'd store in Memcache, right? And then when I get it back out the next time, if I set it, right, if I say memcache.set and give it, and then give it the item. Oh, right, it's just item because it has the key inside of it. Should set it. Okay. So the point is this is now in Memcache. We can see that in the viewer if I have that open. The key is that session ID. What was that session ID? It's in the resources. That. Copy. Then paste that over here. Did it just copy 4B07? That's great. I know, I want the whole thing. And so now, inside of Memcache, I've stored this. I can pull it back out of Memcached, unmarshal it, store it in my object, and that's how I can look up keys, okay? Everybody following what we're basically trying to do here?
Yeah, so in your cookie on the client, you store just this unique ID, and then that unique ID becomes the key in Memcache by which you could reference a whole bunch of other data associated with each client.
Yep.
Comparing that to just storing all the client's data in the cookie, if we were to store email in the cookie, we'd want to somehow encrypt that, right?
Yeah.
We'd use HMAC or...
Yeah, so in this case, we don't really need to, because if you generate the session ID and it's pretty random and unguessable, then you probably don't have to encrypt it, okay? And most sites, you'll see session IDs thrown around, and they're not encrypted. And that's because the chances of you being able to guess somebody else's session ID is extremely small. And if you put other protections in place, like maybe tie a session ID to an IP address, then you could protect yourself in that way. But in general, you don't have to do that. I mean, remember how I told you that UUIDs are super unique?
Yeah.
There's no way they can guess all of them. There's too many. And so,
Yeah.
incidentally, I was wrong. There are more atoms in the universe than there are UUIDs. There's only 10 to the 50 UUIDs, and there's 10 to the 80 atoms in the universe. So. But there are more UUIDs than there are stars in the universe, apparently. So.
I feel sorry for whoever did all that counting.
No, because the number of atoms in the universe is a useful measurement to give you a sense of the scale of something, right? Like 10 to the 80 is a very big number, and a Google is 10 to the 100. That's why Google. That's where the name Google comes from. They misspelled Google though, so that's kind of funny. That is not how you spell Google, like 10 to 100. It's like.
Did they do it intentionally or not?
I don't know.
But do you know where the name Google for that number came from?
Oh, from like a 9-year-old kid or something.
The man's daughter was an infant daughter, I believe, and said Google as he was trying to figure out what to name the number.
Do you know why?
And you know where I learned that from? Carl Sagan's
Oh,
Carl
okay.
Sagan.
Cosmos.
This is officially a tangent?
This is
Fine,
definitely a
I'm just
tangent.
telling you.
Okay. Let's finish this code. So we need to unmarshal item.value into the map. Remember ampersand n. And now we should be able to see the map. And the point is you can modify this map and keep it around, and you can use it per session, okay? So now I can work with it and go and do stuff. So that is a common pattern, and like I said, you can just store the session ID. And you've probably seen this on other sites. This is essentially what they've done. They added a few more things to it, like the email, but this number is a session ID. And in their database somewhere, they have this key. Maybe not using Memcache, but use something like it. And that's all they do.
This might actually increase performance, right? Because you're not sending as large of a cookie.
Yeah, because every time you send data with a request, you're sort of adding to the amount. Now, because of the way networks work, remember that breaks up into packets, and there's a MTU, the maximum transmission unit or whatever, that defines the size of the largest packet. And in general, it's like 1,400 bytes. So as long as you fit in that 1,400 bytes, anything less than that is no faster, because that's one packet. But as soon as you go over that, now you're 2 packets, right? And that's at least 2 separate things that have to get to the server, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it can, once your cookies get really big, that can be a big performance loss in the anyway. So yeah, session ID is a good idea. And it also makes the security a little easier. You don't have to do this encryption stuff. Any questions about that?
No, that's awesome. You'll push that one up to get done?
Yeah. Let me do that. So. But we don't have to do that if, wait, did I include? If we use the Google sessions, because then we don't really need to do sessions. Okay. So added, counter, and session. Though we could key on the user's email and then store data that way. But I don't find it very often that you need to do that. So in general, we're going to use the data store instead, which is more permanent. Which is probably too big of a topic to tackle in 15 minutes. So,
Implement sessions in 15 minutes.
anybody have any other questions about anything we've covered today so far?